If you have a question for Dr. Donna, please do leave it on my page and I will be happy to answer the question for you. Welcome to another episode of Talking with Dr. Donna. I'm your host, Dr. Donna Carey, and I am so happy that you have joined us this evening. We're going to talk about something that I know is not usual for us to talk about. It's maybe uncomfortable for some of you, but we are going to talk about it tonight. I have two great guests, and we're going to have a conversation. But before we do that, I want to talk to you a little bit about my show. Of course, this is Talking with Dr. Donna. Every Thursday at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, you have an appointment with your doctor. So join in. My goal is to build a network for generational health. That means that we as a community, that we are developing mental and emotional health, spiritual health, physical health, and we got to pay attention to our environmental health. If we pay attention each generation to these four pillars, I firmly believe that we can make an impact on premature deaths in the African American community. So thank you for being a part of the Generational Health Network. April. This is the last Thursday in April. It is Sexual Assault Awareness and Prevention Month. And all month we've had conversations about sexual assault and awareness and prevention. And not just communities of color, but also in communities that are just generally marginalized. Last week we talked to Dr. Inwards Breland and we talked about sexual assault awareness and prevention in the LGBTQ+ community. And tonight we're going to really focus in on our young adolescent girls and boys, because sexual assault does not just occur in girls and anymore. I know you may have thought about that in the past, that it's only for girls. It's not just girls. So if you got any young children in your life, boys or girls, this is the show for you to watch tonight. If you are a male or a female, this is the show for you to watch tonight. But before we get into that subject, of course, we've got to talk about the pandemic. We got to talk about the things that are occurring right now in this world around the pandemic that we are starting to slowly emerge from. Coronavirus is still with us, so it's still important that you do those things that we were talking about and have been talking about for the entire year. And that is social distancing, washing your hands, and making sure you wear a mask when you're out. Now, I know that many of you have probably been watching the news, and the CDC over the last couple of weeks keeps coming out with ways in which we can sort of open up. One of the reasons that we can open up more is because of vaccines and vaccinations. So I want to encourage you, if you have not already received a vaccine, that this is the time to do it. No time to waste. We need everybody to be vaccinated. And the reason we need you to be vaccinated, because you might be asking me, why do I need to be vaccinated? The reason you want to be vaccinated is because this virus is social. It likes to jump from person to person. And it wants to be alive just like you and I. So what it does is it mutates, it changes, it adapts and adjusts. And so the more that virus is able to jump from person to person, the longer it's allowed to be alive and in our community, the smarter it gets and the more it's able to mutate and to change. And then that makes the vaccines and the treatments that we've already developed not as effective because the virus itself has been changing. So we are a little bit of race against time, and we want to make sure that if you are interested in getting a vaccine, that you have the opportunity to do so. So this Saturday at my church, True Vine Ministries, we're doing another vaccination clinic. We are doing the Pfizer vaccine. That means it's 2 doses, and you have to get both doses in order for it to be as effective as we know it can be, 94, 95% effective against preventing severe disease. That means you getting so sick that you have to go to the hospital, and nearly 100% effective against you dying. Woo! Great odds! Great odds! So get your vaccine. This weekend, walk-ups are accepted, but it's better to make an appointment, then you don't have to wait in line. Phone number is on the screen, 208-4573. Should be 4573, not 4565. 208-4573. Bring an ID, the people you're eligible. If you're 16 and older, 16 and up, you can get a vaccine. Pfizer, 2 doses, May 1st this Saturday, 2nd dose, May 22nd. All right. So, as always, we have some great guests for you. And if you have a question, because I think tonight you're probably going to have a lot of questions. And if you do have a question, I want you to know that you can write it down in the comment section and let me know what questions you have. If you're on my YouTube channel and you have not subscribed yet, I'm going to encourage you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button while you are watching this episode, and then hit the bell icon so that every time I go live, you'll know. If you're watching on my Facebook page, go on over to my YouTube channel, hit subscribe if you haven't already done so. I appreciate you. Okay. Woo! Let's get into it. So tonight I have 2 great guests. I have Tiffany Chaplain and Reverend Dr. Sarai Craine-Pope. Both are my girls, and I appreciate them being on tonight. We're going to start with Reverend Dr. Sarai Craine. Let's go ahead and bring Dr. Sarai Craine in. We're going to call her Dr. Sarai tonight. Hi, Dr. Sarai.
Hi. Hello, Dr. Donna. How are you?
I'm good. Welcome to Talking with Dr. Donna. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me tonight.
I'm going to talk a little bit about you, brag a little bit about you first, and then we're going to have a conversation and just talk, because you are so knowledgeable that we're going to have a conversation and you're going to help us to help ourselves. So let me tell you all about Reverend Dr. Sarai Craine-Pope. She earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in Psychology and Education from the University of California, Santa Cruz. And while studying abroad in Ghana, West Africa, she acknowledged her call to ministry. Upon returning to the United States, she preached her licensing sermon and was ordained by the age of 24. She has served in full-time vocational ministry, and she's also earned her Master's of Theological Studies degree at the Pacific School of Religion in Berkeley, and her doctorate, come on now, in ministry from San Francisco Theological Seminary. Her dissertation is entitled Towards a Healing Church, Psycho-Spiritual Healing for Female Survivors of Sexual Violence in the Church of God, and address the crisis of sexual and intimate violence in the United States and biblical text. We're going to get into that. Don't worry. I know. Put a pin right there, everybody. Put a pin. Dr. Craine is state certified in sexual assault counselor and nationally certified member of the American Association of Pastoral Education. She was appointed the Deputy Chief of Violence Prevention by the City of Oakland in 2020. That was just last year. And in her role as Deputy Chief of Violence Prevention, she oversees the strategic implementation of public health approaches to gender-based violence, and their pilot program aimed to provide an alternate response to nonviolent law enforcement calls in the city of Oakland. Can we get a thank you, hallelujah, amen on that one? She's also the co-chair of the Alameda County United Against Human Trafficking Task Force and various community initiatives in the city of Oakland and greater East Bay area. So that is Reverend Dr. Sarai Craine. Hey! All right. I want to introduce my second guest. Tiffany Chaplain, are you there, Tiffany? Yay!
I'm trying to be there.
You made it in. You made it in. Good evening. Good to see you. All right, so let me tell everyone a little bit about who you are, Miss Tiffany.
It's good to see you both.
Tiffany is the Deputy District Attorney and has been working in the Juvenile Justice Center in Alameda County for 4 years. As the juvenile, I can't even speak tonight. At the Juvenile Justice Center, I should just say JJC, she is the lead prosecutor assigned to Girls Court, where she works collaboratively with defense attorneys, probation officers, and advocates to determine the best outcomes for our at-risk youth who are involved in the juvenile delinquency system. It's great to have somebody on the inside who looks and thinks and is advocating for our young folks. She's also the chair of Safety Net, which is the county's multidisciplinary team, and it was created to develop safety plans for youth who are at risk of exploitation. The weekly meetings that she holds are attended by advocates from community-based organizations, district attorney advocates, school district liaisons, mental health professionals, and youth. Miss Tiffany has been a prosecutor for 25 years. I didn't say that to make you sound old either, Miss Tiffany. So welcome. We have a lot to discuss, and you both are experts in this area. But before we start, we're going to take a little look at this video. So, and then we'll come back and talk. This video is actually going to speak for itself for the moment. So go ahead and let's roll the video. Wow. I don't know if what you guys think about that, but that is such a powerful video. Let me hear from you. What you all think about that? How this impacts the work that you do? Let's start with you, Dr. Sarai.
Well, I really appreciate the visual, especially as it's very succinct. It's very, it's not as graphic, and I think that it's a bit more digestible for individuals that are around this and impacted by it, but don't understand that it's actually happening. I think when we start talking about issues like sexual exploitation, which is exactly what we see here, or trafficking, it's a form of human trafficking. Oftentimes we think about that in the context of it being, overseas, and, that it doesn't happen right here in Oakland, but it is happening right here in Oakland, right now, in our county, in our area, in this beautiful, progressive, liberal Bay Area. It's happening right under our nose. It's happening in schools. It's happening in neighborhoods. It's happening in, jobs. And so besides the sexual exploitation and the sexual trafficking that this one clip hits on, it also highlights where gender-based violence is at the intersections of sexual exploitation, sexual assault, and domestic violence. In this scenario, we see that it started off as this relationship, a trusting relationship, an intimate relationship, somewhere where this young woman should have felt safe. And before you know it, there's this process of grooming, a process of seducing her into a lifestyle that she didn't ask for. She was just trying to get a fry on her way home.
Right.
And oftentimes that's the entree. And for those of us who are naive about these issues, we don't understand just how seamless the seduction is, and how individuals end up victims to this type of harm and violence.
Right. I'm going to stop you right there, Reverend Dr. Sarai. I said I would call you Dr. Sarai. And I want to get Tiffany in, because this clip came from you, Tiffany. You sent this to me because you use this in the work that you do. So tell me, how does this impact what you do in girls' court and your time as the lead prosecutor?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we have seen this a lot, and I just confirmed that last year we had about 316 youth in Alameda County, and that's the ones that we can identify who are involved in being exploited. And so this, and it's important, as Dr. Craine-Pope said, that this is a local issue. Oakland is one of the hot spots, unfortunately, for this activity. One number showed that Oakland is third in the state for trafficking, and it is one of the most popular in the United States for exploitation. How I see it is the young girls will come in on usually a theft-related charge, because, this is a need. This is somewhat born out of poverty and desperation. So they're coming in on other crimes. And when we do a further investigation, we learn that they are being exploited. The entry age is 11, 12 years old. And when you think about it, it makes sense for those of us who either have young children or work with young children. That is a vulnerable age. Girls are learning about themselves. They're beginning, to get interested in the other sex, or sometimes the same sex, but in a different way than a friendship. And it's very sad, but I want to underscore that it is happening here and now.
I want to just put a definition up of what trafficking is and exploitation, and have you all talk about how you would define trafficking and exploitation. So it says trafficking involves transporting someone into a situation of exploitation. Well, we saw that a little bit in this video, right? Is there a difference between trafficking and exploitation, or are they on a continuum? Or are they the same thing? What is that?
So I would say in my world, in the advocacy world, we started using the term exploitation a bit more, really out of resistance and really out of a resolve to not sugarcoat or make it comfortable for people to talk about the issue. Sexual exploitation, it begs the question, what is being exploited? I think in this clip we saw that he exploited her vulnerability, exploited the trust, and made an opportunity. And ultimately what it is the commodification of the body. And so, and oftentimes, trafficking isn't just a woman's body. You don't see it. You don't typically see it solo. You see it in tandem with trafficking drugs, trafficking, guns, trafficking, a variety of other things that are illegal. But yeah, that would be the distinction that we would make. And I think human trafficking is a bit more palatable. It's easier to talk. We don't like to use sexual language because we sexualize the issue instead of making the issue about exploitation and or violence. But I think human trafficking is more inclusive of sexual trafficking, labor trafficking, and other types of ways that human bodies are commodified.
Got it. Tiffany, you want to add to that, or what do you say?
No, I agree wholeheartedly with the doctor here, and especially it does make people uncomfortable to say exploitation, but we need them to sit in that because we want them to act and take measures either through advocacy to the legislators for policies, for funding, when they see something, say something. I know we're using that term a lot, but there are national hotlines that can be contacted if you suspect that a youth is being exploited. And we want people to know this isn't about, I know when I was growing up, we would call the girls the fast girls, right?
Yeah.
And right. And so, oh, she's fast. And this isn't about that. This isn't about promiscuity.
That's right.
So we want people to kind of reframe their thinking around what is going on with the young girls who you think are fast.
Very important.
Yeah. So I want to put up just a few statistics as you both have been saying that this is happening across the state, across the world. We know that globally about 71% of those who are exploited are female, but almost 30% are male. And I think that's something that a lot of us forget, that this is not just for girls. This is about the boys as well. But women and girls are disproportionately affected and forced into labor. They're about 99% of the victims in the commercial sex industry, which is a little different from I shouldn't say just, but different from the exploitation. And then 1 in 4 victims of human trafficking are children. And just like you were saying, Tiffany, the average age a teen enters the sex trade in the United States is 12 to 14 years old. So 1 in 4 victims are children, and they can enter as young as 12 to 14 years old. And then finally, according to the National Human Trafficking Hotline, and I know these are things you guys already know, this is what you deal with every day, but I want to just give some information for the audience, that California consistently has the highest number of human trafficking incidents reported in the United States. So that California is a hot spot, like you said. But there's something that you said, Tiffany, I want to go back to. You said that this is not about promiscuity.
That's right.
Can you just say a little bit more about that? Like, if it's not about promiscuity, right? If it's not the fast girls, like, what is exploitation and human trafficking? You know, a sexual assault. What are these things about?
Well, and just like Dr. Crane stated, it's about making the body into a commodity for someone else. Um, and I think when we talk about exploitation, what happens is they choose the most vulnerable victims in our society. So you will see largely youth who are involved in the foster care system
That's right.
are being exploited. And so these are youth who, are not with their families. Sometimes they are not feeling love or supported. And so they will attach themselves to anyone who shows them an amount of love. And then those people twist that love in a
Hmm.
very, wicked way. Just like you saw in that cartoon, which, gives kind of a high level of what can happen. And there are trauma bonds that form between the youth and their exploiter, wherein she believes, and I'm saying she, sometimes it is he, um, that the person who is exploiting them is the only person who will accept them,
That's right.
that there's no one else who is going to be there for them. That's their ride or die, right?
Mhm.
And even though they're being mistreated at times, there must be something that they did to deserve it. And that's how the domestic violence part of it comes in,
Mhm.
which is it just twists their mind. And so if you have someone who is in the foster care system, who's 11, 12 years old, who is looking for love, and someone comes to her, then that is a very sad combination. And
Hmm.
at that point, it's not about, oh, she likes sex, which is what we mostly, the fast girls are promiscuous because they like to have sex with one or multiple people. It's more than that. This is what she's doing to maintain her relationship. And so it goes much deeper. It's not about satisfying a sexual need.
Right.
Yeah. So, Dr. Sarai, you want to expand on that, or you good with that?
Perfect.
Or something else? Perfect. Okay. I
Yeah.
want to put this, you guys are just like, I just appreciate you being here, because we need to talk about these things that are difficult to talk about. And so I thank you for being on tonight. And for those of you who are watching, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section and we'll get to them towards the end of the show. But let us know if you have any questions that you want. You said this, Ms. Tiffany, so I want to just put this up. It's talking about the estimate of 1 out of 7 endangered runaways were likely child sex trafficking victims. And of these, 88%, just like you said, Ms. Tiffany, were in the care of social services or foster care when they ran away. Our most vulnerable children getting taken advantage of. Now, Reverend Sarai, you used to work and still do work in the domestic violence realm. And we know that this, as we saw in the video, starts out in a relationship and then it turns into violence. Can you talk a little bit about that move, that change, and how that impacts our young girls and women or men who are in these situations?
Absolutely. And I think, there's so many layers. And one of the problems that has happened in the field is that we have otherized these types of violence. And we're otherizing it oftentimes out of, I think some of it's a lack of knowledge. I think some of it is, a lack of awareness around, where things are at the intersections. I like to intentionally use language like gender-based violence because it's inclusive of exploitation and trafficking and sexual assault and domestic violence. I think, an intimate relationship is one of the easiest entrees for this type of, violence that happens. Unfortunately, I think on a global level, and on a societal level, we look at these as sexual issues and not violent issues. And when we think about violence, we think about Black and brown boys getting shot up in East Oakland, not understanding that exposure to domestic violence, sexual exploitation, sexual assault, specifically intimate partner violence, it is the number one indicator for a child that will end up either causing harm or experiencing harm in their lifetime. So exposure to that in childhood is the single greatest predictor of their experiences long term. And we're not having those conversations. And so when I'm talking to people about, this surge of gun violence or the type of gun violence that we see in places like Oakland and other urban areas, I'm like, okay, so if someone is using gun violence to manage conflict, you think they're going home and hugging their girlfriends and wives or their partners? No, they're beating them, they're raping them, and then they're forcing them to get money, right? Like, you're not going to have some kingpin who's just trafficking meth and heroin out there and doesn't see that a woman, if you sell some meth, some coke, a crack rock, you're making one transaction and then that person goes away and then that product and inventory is gone. You have a body that is still breathing and can still make money. And so now what you find is this entree into these relationships, and before you know it, they become extraordinarily abusive, extraordinarily manipulative, and really violent. But a lot of times, even the victims themselves, they know that they're experiencing harm, but they won't necessarily call it violence, especially if they have been exploited to the point where the individual that's exploiting them makes them believe that they're the only ones who will keep them safe. We also know that individuals that try to leave the life are so vulnerable to other types of violence, particularly being killed. So I think that, forms of prevention is complicated. We're talking about how do we prevent these types of violence. If we're looking upstream, we're really looking at what it means to be in healthy relationships. We're looking at what happens when we do have a foster care system that does not protect girls, especially Black and brown girls. And I'll also say that a lot of queer and trans youth are extraordinarily vulnerable because the market for queer and trans bodies is so profitable, okay? And you have a whole lot of people out here, and this isn't some perv that's in a creepy car. These are B-boys in hoodies and Jordans, and they are purchasing trans women, okay? They are purchasing little boys, and they are having sex with them, okay? So it's not this prototype, stereotypical, creepy white guy. Yeah, that happens, but it's D-boys, it's preachers, it's doctors, it's professionals who are purchasing sex from vulnerable individuals. And I think that these relationships just become so toxic and dysfunctional, and we're not renouncing that violence. Even on the church level, we're not renouncing it. We're not talking about it from the pulpit. And so that's why I've been popular in some circles, and some people are like, we ain't bringing that. We always talk about this, but we don't talk about it no more. We're not actually talking about it. So I'll park it there.
Yes.
I went on a tangent, but I just wanted to end my comment there.
Yes, well, that's why we're talking about it tonight. That's the exact reason why we're talking about it tonight, to bring awareness. And, just like every month that we have, you're like, well, it doesn't just have to happen in this month. April is Sexual Assault Awareness and Prevention Month, but we should be talking about it, being aware of it, and attempting to prevent it every month. So I want to pivot a little bit to the conversation of being aware. Right. So we've talked about awareness. Hopefully people now understand that this is a big issue, not just, somewhere else, but a big issue here in California, right here in Oakland, that this is a major issue. So we brought some awareness to that. Now I want to talk about the other side of it, which is the prevention side. We talked a little bit about who's most vulnerable, and but we know that it's 88% are in the social services, social service system. So, but that means that there's, a percentage of people who, 12% who are not in the social service system. So what can we do to help prevent this from happening to another young woman or another young man? I'm going to start with you, Tiffany.
So that's a tough question. I think that because it is complex, we know that our girls suffer from many of our girls suffer from self-esteem problems. It's part of their
Mhm.
development. There's a
Yeah.
stage where, they're very
Yeah.
conscious about themselves, who their friends are, how they look, their hair, how they dress. And, it sometimes just happens to be that the youth are in the wrong place at the wrong time. And they're getting the compliments from someone who they shouldn't be getting a compliment from.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think some of this hand in hand goes with esteem
Yeah.
and making sure that our girls know that I'm going to say it here, Black girl magic, right?
Mhm.
And that they have aunties who love them and support them, that they have people to go to talk to when they have questions, that they have a safe person that they
That's right.
can seek out and identify, that they can have conversations with, frankly, where they won't feel judged, and someone who will advise them well. Um, um, and to make sure that they know that their bodies are their temples,
That's right.
Mm,
right?
mhm.
And that they are to be revered and treated like queens
Mm.
or future queens.
Yes.
There's only one queen in the house, but queens.
That's right.
That's
Thank
beautiful.
you. All right. Reverend Sarai, what do
Yeah.
you think?
So I
What do
think that this is going to sound very cliche, but the answer is very simple. It really is love, and
mm,
um,
Yes.
lavishing love. Because when you see the absence or the withdrawal from love, is when the vulnerabilities increase. And as we see, the statistics do suggest that the overwhelming majority are individuals that have entered into social services or foster care, but that's not always the case. I've had, folks who had two parents in the household. So this whole racist trope around, well, Black people only have, one parent in the household, and, the mom is a crackhead. And I'm not saying that those things don't happen, but it can happen with two families, two parents who are working hard,
mhm,
who love God, who's exposed their kids to education. But there's a vulnerability there that gets exploited by the intimate relationship. The other thing that I'll say, Dr. Donna, is that I find that the burden of prevention around sexual violence, gender-based violence, domestic violence, exploitation usually rests on the victim.
mm,
You need to, build your self-awareness and go out two by two when you go with your girlfriends, and, make sure you text somebody and share your location. But we're not talking about the individuals that are causing harm. We're not talking about the fact that this wouldn't be such a lucrative, institution if there weren't men buying bodies.
mm,
And we need to talk about what it means to be a purchaser. We need to talk about what it means to be an exploiter, because gone are the days where, you have this 1970s superfly pimp with a, mink hat on and an alligator Cadillac on Vogues. No, these are 15 and 16-year-old boys who are selling their little homegirls, selling, sex on campus, okay, at
mm,
Skyline. It's happening right now,
mm,
in COVID, out of COVID. And so how do we talk to young people and just talk to adults about what it means to honor the temple,
mhm,
what
Amen.
it means when the desecration of not just the body, but the family system and the kingdom and the
Amen.
nation,
That's
mhm.
when, how not African it is for us to do these types of things to one another. And
Right.
so
right.
I really feel like if we address the commodification issue, when we address the purchasing issue, that we will see a major decrease. Now we're in crisis and intervention mode, and the upstream prevention side seems so overwhelming. But I think when we can really get to that, we will see some impact.
I had to just write down commodification. I'm like, what? Sarai just dropping all kind of high Scrabble words on my show. Don't be dropping Scrabble words. Commodification.
Those SAT words.
Okay. I get it. Yes, that's very deep, very deep. And I just want to underscore what you both have said, which is, you know, the statistics shows that most of this happens to people like within the ages of 12 to 14. And we know that that is such a vulnerable age for so, you know, for so many reasons, just in terms of normal development. They are unsure of themselves. So we can pour in love in from the household, in the family, into that child. But there's just that developmental kind of void that happens in that age group that makes them such easy targets because of their development mentally and physically at that age. But I also want to go back to something you both said, which is really talking about the victim and not the perpetrator. Both of you work in high power positions where you get to focus in on the perpetrator. So I'm going to start with you, Tiffany, because you're the prosecutor. What do we do about these perpetrators or with these perpetrators? What is that system like for them?
So that's another, you know, pretty complex question. You know, Dr. Sarai described, you know, the D-boy who are juveniles. And in the juvenile system, our purpose is rehabilitation. And so, but there are no programs available for, I'm going to say, gender-based young men to deal with violence or to deal with exploitation. There are times when we have had young men actually arrested for domestic violence, for instance, against, you know, a girlfriend. And in adult land, there are batterers programs that we would make as a condition of their probation. There is no such program for our probation officers to send young men to. Right? So how, you know, so it's just individual therapy, which is, you know, a whole other issue, because there should be some sort of group session where people sit around the young offenders and discuss, you know, the behavior in addition to individual therapy. As far as adults go, that there are consequences, especially if they are exploiting minors, and the consequences are harsh. But overall, I do believe, as Dr. Sarai said, it would be helpful if there were programs that address this. I would like to, before I give the floor back to Dr. Sarai, I would like to point out that oftentimes, more often than not, the exploiter, the younger African-American exploiters, have the same background as those that they're exploiting.
That's right.
So, right? So they may be in a situation, they may not be in foster care, but they may just be one phone call away from foster care. You know, there's no supervision, there's no love in the home. They're witnessing outrageous violence in their communities. No one is helping them to address the feelings that they may have. They're seeing their homeboys getting shot and killed. And so they also are coming from the same background.
That's right.
And just see the female as a way to make money. So I don't know that I answered your question.
You did.
I may have only posed, you know, a question generally, like why don't we have something to address this?
Well, I'm gonna toss that ball into our Deputy Chief of Violence Prevention and toss that in her court and see, what are your thoughts about that?
What's the question specifically is around programming? What's the question?
Is around what do we do with the perpetrators, particularly if they're juvenile, like Miss Tiffany was just talking about?
Yeah, I think it's really complicated, and I feel like addressing this needs to be obviously addressed in systems, right? So in law enforcement and in the judicial system, and it also needs to be addressed from a grassroots, community-based, and a family and faith-based approach. I think far too long, these other supportive systems or these supportive community institutions and agencies like the church, like CBOs, nonprofits, the education system, a lot of folks love placing the blame and pointing fingers at law enforcement when I've yet to see, folks step up and, to take that to task. And there are certain limitations for individuals that have caused harm. If you have caused harm and been, arrested for, a particular type of crime, you can be disqualified from certain services. So, and some agencies that are providing and implementing services are so overwhelmed by intervention for victims that just from a values perspective, they're like, we're not investing money in men and boys. But here's the problem, and this is the problem with the siloing and the otherizing of these types of violence. There is a ton of money that's being pushed into gun violence reduction, prevention, and intervention. There are so many resources for individuals that may be out here shooting, carjacking, causing other types of harm that are considered really violent. And there's incentives. They can get paid for doing life coaching and for doing, job readiness programs, but they're not talking about gender-based violence. They're only talking about putting a gun down. But again, many of the individuals that are shooting were either exposed to violence, experienced violence, were getting tickled on themselves and they don't want to talk about it. And so we're missing these opportunities to address the toxic masculinity, to address the patriarchy, to address this national, not even just tolerance, but celebration of violence against women and girls and gender non-conforming people. We don't just tolerate it in our community, we celebrate it. And it's not just from rappers, because we love taking shots at the rappers and we love taking shots at rap music and, this is so violent and they got the girls twerking on the videos. But what about these pastors that aren't talking about it in the church? I knew
you were going to go there, Reverend Sarai. I knew you were going to go there.
Pastors exploiting the women in their congregations. I'm gonna say it right now. It's a pastor in Oakland right now who has been ministering for years, and I know for a fact that he's raped at least 5 girls.
So we've talked. Look, I'm gonna just stop you right there before you keep going.
I'm a spirit. I'm in passion.
Because I know you, sis. But I really think this is an important point. The point is that. We need programs, right? We need programs for our youth and so often, and adults who are perpetrating these types of violent crimes. And I think that one of the things is that we don't think about it as a violent crime, like you both have said. We don't think about the exploitation or the trafficking as a violent crime. We don't think about sexual assault within a relationship as a violent crime. But it is all violence. And I think it's important when you talk about having a department of violence prevention that you're there to be able to make sure that within the system, we recognize all types of violence, not just the gun violence, but all types of violence.
Right.
But I want to go back to this system approach, right? And I'm a firm believer that if you want to change the system, you got to sometimes get into the system, and you both are in the system. So
Right.
working on behalf of our children in the system. That's how you make it better, right? You get great people to come in and work in that system to make changes. So I know I'm putting you on the spot with this question, sorry. But
I
I'm gonna
know.
ask you, you can take a moment and pause and think about it. But if you could change one thing within the system that you're currently working in to help this situation, what would it be? If either of you are ready to answer that question,
I'm ready.
that helps us as citizens to help advocate on behalf of what somebody within the system says should be done to make a significant change. So I know you're ready, Reverend Sarai. Go ahead.
I'm ready. Because what I bring to my systems experience is 20 years of nonprofit experience, right? And vocational ministry experience, where I had no support. What I will say is that if there was one thing I can change in Oakland, and I'm making a plea to everyone who's listening right now, is that we put the pressure on policymakers to invest in these types of programs. I got into the system to try to influence and provide leadership to advocate for really pulling down resources. I'm not taking shots at nobody on council or any of our elected officials, but I will say this, that in the city of Oakland, progressive Oakland, old liberal Oakland, grassroots community activism Oakland has invested less than 0.1% of its annual budget in programs geared for gender-based violence. Less than 0.1% of the annual budget, and that 0.1 was actually an increase. Okay, so it's like, put the money where the mouth is. The numbers don't lie. That's what Sean Carter said. The men lie, women lie, numbers don't. So you have all kind of folks that talk about the types of things that they stand for, and this is what. But where is the money though? So my plea is, there is a special meeting on Monday that is being held by our city council to address some of the recommendations that came out of the Reimagining Public Safety that came out. This was a process that was initiated and co-authored by Council President Nikki Fortunato Bass and Council Member Lauren Taylor from East Oakland. And the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force published over 100 recommendations for council to consider in reappropriating some of the funds that are coming in our annual budget. And so what we need to do is call in, make public comment, and apply pressure and tell them they need to pass a budget that prioritizes gender-based violence. And so if we're at 0.1%, can we just get to 1% of the budget? That's what we're hoping for. So that would be my one thing if I could change today.
Perfect. What time is this city council?
It's at 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock.
Go to
All right.
www.oaklandca.gov, type in or search city council, and you will see it. You can join either on live stream or Zoom.
All right. Thank you. That's a great thing we can do. All right. Miss Tiffany, you think of something?
Yes, and I have many conversations with many people from many walks of life and many backgrounds. And what I would really like to see is, as opposed, I think that systems move very slowly, and they are generally not very culturally competent. And what I would like to see is from the community, and I mean our community, that there are people who are vested in our community who have programs and support our youth, whether it is the survivors or victims of exploitation or the perpetrators. I think a lot of times what is frustrating to me is that there are other people who have decided what they think we need. And we don't say what it is. Our voices are not heard about what we want. someone else is looking and says, you know what, this is what they need, and that's what they advocate for. And sometimes I completely disagree, and I know that people from my culture and background would not agree with that.
Mm.
And so I would like to see more involvement from um, culturally competent
Yes.
community members
Yes.
to resolve these challenges and
Beautiful.
barriers that we have.
Beautiful.
All right.
Beautiful.
Thank you both. So there's a couple of questions in the chat I want to get to. One is, are the girls in the CSCC courts working? So are the courts working, Tiffany? And maybe you can also explain what CSEC stands for.
CSEC.
Sure. Right. And as Dr. Sarai said, we call it CSEC. It stands for commercially sexually exploited children.
Are those courts working?
So I'm not sure that I understand what are they saying? Are they helpful?
Are
Are
they
they
helping?
successful? Are they
Yes,
efficient?
yes, yes. Are they making a
You
difference?
know, sure. From what I can see, they are. For those youth who take advantage of the services, for the youth who and you know, getting into the cycle of violence and the stages of change, the process is not immediate, especially for our young girls who are actively being exploited. Because you could imagine, how they've been brainwashed, and already coming from a lot of trauma and pain. You're not going to see immediate change. And once they start taking advantage of all of the services that are available, what we have seen is a positive trajectory.
Yeah.
That not only is their criminality reduced, but they begin going to school more regularly or taking an interest in the outcome of their futures. What are they going to do? They start taking control of their lives, regaining some control over their bodies and what they want to do in the future. And so, and conversely, for the youth, which is a smaller number, who don't take advantage, it's just what you expect. You see them continually recidivate. They continue to commit more crimes. They're not in school. They're, still truant. They're still what we call AWOLing, which means they're runaways. We don't know where they are. They're couch surfing. And so, yes, it does make a difference.
All right. I think this has been an amazing conversation. I definitely do not think that this should be the last time that we get together and have this conversation, because as you both said, this is an ongoing problem. System change is slow. And we are asking for behavioral changes on both sides of the issue. Behavioral changes in the youth that are exploited, and behavioral changes in the people who are exploiting them.
Right.
So that's going to take effort from all sides and from all of us. But I want to give you each a final word to say anything that you want to say that we didn't touch on, any point that you want to make sure that people are aware of and know about. So I'm going to give you final word. Okay, I'm going to let you go, Reverend Sarai. You go first.
I'll be very brief. Again, I would encourage folks to engage civically. We need your voice. So many of the voices that do engage, in the process of engaging council, which is the way things move in our city and in our area. A lot of folks are very passionate white people, and we just need people of color and indigenous folks that can speak on our behalf. And the other part is to engage communally. Volunteer, sign up for trainings and webinars. Don't look at it as just being the advocate's problem. It's all of our issue. It's not just a women's issue. We will never see the abolition of gender-based violence with women being the only voice and women being the only advocacy. So this is not just a women's issue. This is an everybody issue. So I implore you to please apply pressure civically, but also communally. And thank you for being here. Just the fact that you hung in there is really great. That's it.
All right. Miss Tiffany, final thoughts.
My final thought is, if you believe or suspect that a young person is being trafficked, I was looking up, here's the hotline.
Thank you.
It's 1-888-373-7888. And I can tell you that I am a part of a group of emails where when people call in Oakland to report things, the law enforcement receives it.
Say that number again, Miss Tiffany.
Reported.
I'm sorry. Say that number one more time, please.
Sure. 1-888-373-7888.
Great. I want to make sure everyone got it.
If you're driving down the street and you see something that you know she's not fast, call the national hotline for human trafficking.
All right. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for being here. So I guess my prescriptions, Dr. Donna's prescription, my prescription when you see a doctor and you have an appointment, my prescriptions are exactly what Reverend Dr. Sarai said, which is to get involved with the City Council this Monday coming up. There's an important vote on the budget. We want to make sure we try to get into this budget. We talk a lot about police reform and let's take money from the police and put it here or there or everywhere. Well, let's put it right here into some programs for our youth, to the offenders and those who are exploited. And then I guess my second prescription is, if you are a community-based organization, if you have any sort of ability to make a program that you are of African American or Latin or in a community of color, if you have the ability to have a program that will help either the children or the youth that are exploited, or help those who are perpetrating and these crimes and these issues, that you will consider doing some programming around this. We, as you heard Ms. Tiffany say, we need more culturally competent programming to take care of our children. Those are my prescriptions. Get involved civically. Call your city council member. Call in on Monday for the budget discussion. And if you are a community-based organization, go ahead and get involved. And I'm sure there's funding out there for it. I haven't looked, but I can bet that there is some funding out there for this type of work. And finally, to each and every one of us, if we think that someone is being exploited, to contact that hotline number. Again, the phone number was area code 888-373-7888. Thank you so much for watching again. This recording is going to be restreamed on my YouTube channel, Talking with Dr. Donna. You can watch it again. You can hear all the facts at 8:30 tonight. It's going to be restreamed on the YouTube channel. So if you joined late and you missed any part of that, go to my YouTube channel, Talking with Dr. Donna, at 8:30. Watch it. Subscribe, hit the little bell icon right next to it, and so that you know when we're going live. Thank you again, Reverend Dr. Sarai Craine-Pope. Thank you again, Tiffany Chaplain. Thank you, ladies. You are amazing. Black girl magic all over this screen tonight. So thank you so much for each and every one of you for joining us. And remember, you have an appointment every Thursday with your doctor at 6:30 p.m. Until next week, take care and be safe.
All right.
If you have a question for Dr. Donna, please do leave it on my page and I will be happy to answer the question for you.